Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, August 21st. I am streaming early today in an effort to avoid streaming late. I've been up all night and it seems like it's probably only going to correct my sleep schedule if my insomnia ever could shift the sleep schedule a little bit by just pushing forward. And heck, it's worth experimenting a little bit on that. I basically spent the entirety of last week programming my scheduling macro, and I think for the most part I have it as set up as I think I'm going to be able to get it. Unfortunately, while I was able to get better scheduling or actual scheduling happening with posts on Patreon, if people wanted to follow me on Patreon, and Tumblr and Facebook pages. Twitch doesn't let you post anything at all, at least not until you've gotten further with Twitch, and I haven't done anything to take any steps towards that direction yet, to try and be allowed to do more things on Twitch, unlock more features. And yeah, Facebook actually does want you to upload videos directly, but I'm not going to upload videos 2 times just so one copy ends up on Facebook, which is really just not the audience that I'm trying to target anyways. Tumblr really isn't the audience either. I don't know if that many people even are using Tumblr at all, but whatever. Yeah, everything is just all kind of pointless, it feels like, with a lot of these social media sites. Anyways, Twitter, unfortunately, has enough obfuscation in how it's programmed is to stop bots from posting that, like, I can't get around it, which... heck, that's part of the whole thing when people shut down APIs. I'm not even trying to use APIs. I'm literally just trying to program macros to do something as if a human was going to a web page and post a post. But yeah, they don't label their HTML code correctly. And when they do label something, it is through a very obfuscated, intentionally obfuscated way. And Twitter would have been the one that I would have liked to see amongst all the other social medias. I would have liked to see my macros actually work. But heck, I got Tumblr, I got Patreon, I got Facebook. That's something. On Facebook, there's the odd limitation of only being able to post up to 29 days ahead in the future, which seems really stupid and does, I think, very much highlight that that there is not a lot of value in trying to even use Facebook, considering how all of my footage that's pre-recorded is at minimum my second time slot, which I'm starting up again starting January 1st, 2024, is already at the end of March. So I've got like 4 months worth of content ready to go next year. Which, yeah. In that also, as I was programming everything's going to be a mess for the next 30 days or so as far as just YouTube Shorts. There's potentially going to be a lot of them, and they're going to be kind of random. Inherently, the programming is now going to try and push them into later in the evening time slots, because I don't want notifications coming out around YouTube Shorts that then are actively reducing the chances of notifications going out for pre-recorded footage. I really want to re-emphasize, as far as notifications, that first and foremost, I want people to watch my pre-recorded footage, which is the footage I actually want to make and continue to make, instead of being pushed to making YouTube shorts, which suck. It really don't have a lot of my voice in their creation. It is a nicer way to say that. Or even live streams where I'm often not really saying anything particularly interesting, or unique at least. Instead of the damage step with this card battles a face-up non-dark monster. Destroy it. Okay, that worked. I'm also have to admit, certainly I'm watching a lot of Medium, and honestly, I think as I have maybe a season and a half, maybe 2 seasons left of Medium on Amazon Prime. I think I'm just gonna watch Ghost Whisperer, which is kind of Medium but worse. But yeah, it's, I think in its 6th or 7th season is when it really starts to get kind of into the best chunk of content. All of a sudden in the 6th or 7th season, post a 9/11, and you see there's a lot of concerns around like dirty bombs and terrorists and things like that, and that would have been right about the time that Medium was airing originally. But yeah, it becomes a little bit more family friendly. It becomes a little bit more focused on the daughters really being characters, instead of just being things that could either be put in danger, or things that would act as like anchoring steps. Weirdly, the season I'm watching of Medium, and obviously I just for the past week have not played any video games, but yeah, at the end of the previous season she was in a coma, and the coma was due to a tumor that she had removed from her brain that should have really changed how her psychic visions happened, and they kind of quickly dropped that idea for the most part. Yeah, couple episodes she had her hand curled up like she had a stroke, and she walked with a cane as soon as the new season started. It was a real cliffhanger ending, certainly, at the end of the previous season where she was in a coma, but it doesn't really change her abilities in any way, or add any refreshed thought that she wasn't eventually always going to interpret her dreams the correct way and realize that she was always 100% right in what she dreamed as far as seeing visions. I think maybe later in the season they play with it a little bit, but they certainly don't completely change it to something totally different, and they certainly are expanding with the children, the daughters being older actresses, like kid actors. They're getting more screen time, and they're developing more psychic abilities. They toned down, I think, some of the lurid nature of a lot of the crimes. Like, occasionally they still will mention sex crimes and rapists, but they are, by the 7th season, very far away from that pilot where you just have a necrophilic, pedophilic serial killer, and they have like several episodes of that in a row around that first season. And they definitely have gotten very far away from the husband and wife just arguing for argument's sake. They still do argue, Um, you have to kind of admit that Patricia Arquette as Allison is perhaps not the best actress ever to have been picked, but yeah, she does a fine job, and it's not like at the time there was that many roles as the lead on a TV series for female actors. And weirdly, Patricia Arquette really has been just completely missing, and she comes back in Severance as the nasty boss lady in Severance, the Apple TV exclusive, but she comes back and she's just so old, and she's put on a lot of weight just because of being old, and she has long gray hair. I did not for a second, having watched all of season 1 of Severance, even begin to think that it was the same lady. In fact, I kind of thought Patricia Arquette was the Scully character from X-Files, but that's not correct either. Almost certainly that's where this would have come from, is that X-Files was a much bigger success than you might remember these days, and Scully was very popular as part of that, so I could have seen a push to make a new series, a new sci-fi series with a prominent female character, simply because of the success of X-Files. But yeah, it has nothing to do with video games. As for programming the macros, part of the reason I imagine it took a week, other than just being really distracted and watching a lot of TV, and certainly sleeping a lot, I do have this like fear that as I'm getting older, I'm putting myself, is taking longer. It definitely felt like it took a lot longer this time, at least, to get into the right mental mindset to be programming. And there definitely was at least 24 to 48 hours there where I was just banging my head against the wall, and I just was not in that mindset. And that sucks. Although, in all fairness, it is worth pointing out that JavaScript programming and with Selenium is just bad programming environment in the first place. Left to my own devices with enough support libraries, I think I could do something more. Alright, I got nothing here. Let's see what this guy does. They make a big deal about this card. Special summon something here, I guess. What I probably should do, as far as programming goes, is I probably should try to make a separate macro that would put draft posts on Facebook and schedule them separately, but then that would just be this extra macro that I'd have to run every week on top of other macros just to make sure Facebook promotes things. And I was going to have everything air like an hour later if it's not on Facebook, but I mean if it's not on YouTube, an hour later from when it airs on YouTube, but I gave up on that. That's just more programming I didn't want to bother with. We've almost certainly lost here. I think it's worth pointing out that yeah, I lost my train of thought there. I do think I am getting better about just going quiet, as for whatever little that is worth. Instead of saying and all, I do think I've gotten a little bit better at that. But yeah, obviously I haven't been playing this, and there's a lot going on here. That sucked. Well, one of the things here is that we can do a bit of an experiment as far as video game news, in that since it is Monday, since it's early, there's just not a lot of news that happened over the weekend. There almost never is any video game news that happens over the weekend anyways. So we could jump into that fairly quickly. I guess to wrap up the accountability section, I'm still playing the last bits of Destiny Child, the mobile lewd anime waifu game, before it shuts down here in just about a month in its service. They are certainly giving enough rewards at this point where I think I should easily have almost everything I want, if not everything I want, and a little bit extra. There is, I'm still playing also the, what is it called? Star Trek Lower Decks game. I've pretty much given up on playing Marvel Snap, and Master Duel is not really happening at all. Except for when I'm streaming, obviously. I installed a game called Brown Dust 2 that's being recommended a few times as far as something close to Destiny Child. The truth is, there really is just nothing close to Destiny Child. Let's try a different deck. And I played for about 20 minutes and then didn't feel like I was going to like the gameplay mechanic there. Which that is the tall order here, is I want something that basically is just a ripoff of Destiny Child. Same gameplay mechanic, same level of lewdness. Which I've yet to find. Now I've dropped my mouse. So I'm gonna have to pick it up. So yeah, what's going on there? Doesn't seem like it's connecting very fast. There's a game I'm testing out called Tinka-Fuma, Tenka-Fuma, which is a full-on adult game. The problem with adult games, though, even though it is somewhat in gameplay style very similar and to the to Destiny Child, it's considerably lackluster to the 5 to 10 years worth of content that's been added to Destiny Child. So if it was like a couple months old, that would be fine. I could maybe think that it would build into it. But you have a mobile game here that literally has to be downloaded because it can't be on the Play Store. If you're going to buy any currency to do anything in it, as far as microtransactions, you're buying it from an adult gaming platform. It's not good, again, not connected to Google Play, so you can't just purchase through Google Pay services either. And because it is an adult game first and foremost, it does just have kind of bad level of writing. It's too adult for its own good. Every character when they take damage becomes topless, which that is not the case with Destiny Child. Destiny Child was loot. Maybe out of the 300 characters you would occasionally have one or two that had like a nipple slip, and you would definitely have, out of the 300 characters, perhaps half of them would have a lot of cleavage, or effectively just being wearing pasties, but they wouldn't actually show nipples. And I would say Destiny Child's art style, because they're not trying to cross that line, is almost certainly better than Tinka Fuma as a game. Whereas Tinka Fuma is really, at the moment, a small selection of maybe 36 characters in total. The standard cat girls, standard characters like that you would expect to see, and nothing particularly special outside of that. And the main character's too aggressive in his domination of women, I suppose, and at the very beginning, which doesn't make him particularly the most likable thing, and the writing is far too aggressive in that reason too. There's definitely something about just the dumb fun of Destiny Child, in that the main character, at least in the first season, in the first half of the game that they got around to making, really didn't want to be involved at all, and was always being forced to do work, and really just came off as a likable goofball that very often would be put into kind of silly situations. I suppose the question certainly would be to ask is, if I had the money, if I was just rolling in cash, would I justify the idea of just trying to rip off Destiny Child completely? I mean, it definitely had a lot of success in its heyday, so that there would be perhaps some success there that could be had. Like, in its heyday, Destiny Child was, I believe, in like the top 30 as far as just how much it looked like it was making money of all mobile games. Clearly I'm going to to miss it. But then, you know, a year will pass and I'll forget about it, and that'll be that. But yeah, it is looking to me like I'm going to have less distractions going forward as far as mobile games, which is fine. I really shouldn't have been playing that many mobile games or any mobile games at all, and I've got Nintendo Switch games to play certainly instead, at least a couple of them. I've got plenty of side projects to work on, and I've got effectively an infinite amount of video games on Steam to make footage on. The big news today, or more accurately to say Friday, I believe is when this was posted, is we had Larry Herb, formerly known as Major Nelson. Let's see. He seems to be completely out of Microsoft at this point. So he posts this picture of himself showing off that he is visiting Nintendo with a visitor's patch here. And the comment here is hashtag just visiting. Which, yeah, that seems like there's almost certainly you're baiting, at the very least, the idea of some rumor mills there. I assume this is Nintendo of America that he's visiting, not Nintendo of Japan. Looking at the badge, you'd see more Japanese here if it was Nintendo of Japan that he was visiting. But yeah, it would frankly be kind of boring in a lot of ways if all of a sudden Larry Herb is just replacing Doug Bowser. But on a certain level, I almost feel like they hired Doug Bowser simply because his last name was Bowser to replace Reggie. And yeah, a middle step person like Doug Bowser could end up being the middle step person for Larry Herb to be in charge of Nintendo of America, which means effectively he's not really in charge of anything at all, in my opinion. Like, that's just like localization and presentations and sales, deliveries of discs and things like that. Basically nothing is actually made by first party Nintendo, and almost nothing. I don't know if there is a single game that's actually been made by Nintendo of America or even Nintendo of Europe. They are basically just puppet companies. At a certain level, I guess maybe Larry Herb has been under the management of several layers, I'm sure, of Microsoft people, even when he was in charge of the Xbox division of Microsoft. That's still not the highest level of management ever. You would think he would want to do something a little bit more ambitious, and certainly this does not bode well for my theory that he might end up being at DreamWorks, because he had this banner at one point that had the moon showing, And so I was thinking he might end up working at DreamWorks, or I mean, I could even see him doing something at Disney and being a lot more ambitious there. If anything, I feel like this banner might just be some kind of scripted to update picture of the sky. It is a Starfield, and Starfield as a game is about to come out, so maybe that is what he's just trying to do, is promote Starfield. But yeah, it would be assuming way too much to think that maybe he's going to end up being in charge of Bethesda or ZeniMax, and somehow him leaving Microsoft makes that make sense, since Microsoft owns Bethesda and ZeniMax. It would make a lot more sense if he was working at Embracer Group. I almost wonder if he doesn't have an actual plan at all, and he was just like fired. Yeah. It is possible, I guess, if he is working with some company in secret, if he is the new person in charge of Embracer Group or something like that, then it would make sense for him to visit Nintendo and start to negotiate like licensed games from Embracer to a Switch 2, whatever the new Switch console is going to be. And then the only other big news that really even caught my eye today is that a demo for a fan-made PlayStation 1 style Twin Peaks game is available on PC. It's called Twin Peaks Into the Night, inspired by the Twin Peaks cult hit TV series, which I never really figured out why people like that so much. It definitely feels like when people talk about Twin Peaks, or when mainstream video game journals talk about Twin Peaks, that they are definitely overhyping and sensationalizing a TV series that really shouldn't be that overhyped and sensationalized. And yeah, at a certain level, I do kind of see some of the craziness that's kind of cool around David Lynch's content, but we've had far too many games already that were heavily inspired by Twin Peaks. Last thing we need is yet another fan project to do something around Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks in general is just too weird of a story, too weird of a narrative. At best, you end up with a game like Deadly Premonition, which succeeds despite itself, and Deadly Premonition 2 definitely did not succeed in repeating that idea. Clearly, I'm just activating things for the sake of activating things. So yeah, when there's really nothing to talk about and nothing to get riled up about, and when I'm streaming and half asleep, and I'm not quite at that point where I'm actually half asleep yet, but it definitely is coming. It's 35 minutes into a stream and we can just start going through the news. I do want to pull the trigger and start to live stream as soon as I start making some pre-recorded footage, either late in the evening tonight or early in the morning tomorrow. Like, I can't really hide behind the programming excuse anymore. I've got a little bit of videos to still schedule, but it's time to get back to making footage. There is still limitations that YouTube puts on me as far as the number of videos that can be uploaded, which is still I get it. It's just not programmed particularly well. So it's easier by far to say you can only upload 100 videos than it is to say, hey, these 1-minute YouTube shorts shouldn't count towards that. And for almost everyone except for me, nobody's gonna make 100 YouTube shorts and upload them on any high frequency. Yeah, nothing going on the Steam store. We are in a weird position, certainly, in that the opening games night live presentation, I think, is happening on Thursday, and because of that, Jeff Keighley's probably going to talk about or present some more things there too. But yeah, they put out the trailer for that, and I watched it, and weirdly they've squeezed in like Knuckles, Sonic the Hedgehog footage that's animated, whereas the rest of the teaser trailer for the game, I think maybe it's part of Gamescom opening night live event, is hyper realistic visuals. And so just in the middle of that trailer you just have cartoony Knuckles. But yeah, I'm just gonna burn through the news very quickly today, and yeah, today would be kind of a great day for somebody to get on the chat and want to, I don't know, do something weird. I don't want to make promises I can't actually deliver on, but I do feel like this is going to be a 2-hour stream at this rate. Yeah. Let's go through the news though, I guess. Most of this is stuff we've already talked about. Leaked Walking Dead will let players alter the events of the TV show. The update here is the first trailer for The Walking Dead Destinies has been released. I saw a YouTuber talking about this, and the actual companies involved and the visual polish on it, which I agree with the visual polish element, don't really inspire a lot of confidence. So, yeah. If anything, this might be a great example of where a single game would suffer from having the leak come out, because if that trailer was not anywhere close to being ready to be released, if they were going to do a second pass and redo all the graphics, or if they rushed to make that trailer, which I don't know why you'd rush to make a trailer if it's going to just be that bad of quality. But yeah, it definitely does not feel like that is the it doesn't really feel like this style of game benefits by having an early announcement. Almost certainly it's supposed to be Time Thief Redoer. Interesting. Really not getting anywhere so far with playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. Like, almost all this news is old. Tencent bringing back the first-person shooter series Delta Force. Veteran Call of Duty designer David Vonderhaar has left Treyarch. The designer was best known for his work on the Black Ops series. I don't know if I really covered that story before. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's much more to do. Just attack. Just nothing else to do here, and I can feel my sleepiness is coming about here. See what activating this effect does. I really do think these dark decks are just not for me. Yeah, I'm just gonna get wrecked here just by tricks and traps. Which, if anything, this might highlight where potentially making a deck without any monsters at all might actually work in such limited constraints. Let's just end. I'm gonna obviously lose. And honestly, I don't have anything better I can do as far as playing on the dark side and trying to get that extra title for playing on the dark side. Which, noticeably, if you were just like doing a Star Wars thing, or just like the idea of having the title dark side, you put that label in your title, people aren't really going to see it. Let's see. How do I even bring up this character's titles? Or my titles? It's it's just not a thing here. Yeah, you don't hover over these characters' names or anything like that to see titles. But yeah, you would then you run into an issue where the only time it would really make sense to have the title Dark Side is if you're playing an all dark or mostly dark deck, which then severely limits you and your possibilities. Yeah. Weirdly, the dark side does seem to be winning, but I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. Also, we're not winning. We're not getting anywhere close to this. We'll start with this deck. Apparently, the Overwatch 2 director addresses the quote-unquote review bombing on Steam, which at this point, Overwatch on Steam being 7% positive really doesn't deserve to have such a negative connotation of the claim that it's being review bombed. It's being reviewed appropriate to the feelings of the player base. People who actually bought the game, who actually played it, are giving their opinions, and their opinions should not be labeled as bombs, and the implication there shouldn't be that people who review games negatively, honestly, are bombers. Yeah. Mostly, I think he paid a lot of lip service and just acknowledged, according to the subheadline, that many of the negative reviews are due to the canceled player versus event PvE content. There is another source I saw that I don't know if I really believe any of this, that said they saw a lot of reviews were from Chinese players who were upset that there wasn't a Chinese language version of Overwatch 2, which, yeah, clearly that thought isn't going far enough, isn't getting, people aren't buying it enough. Because more people would be pushing that narrative if it really made any sense at all. Like I could see perhaps of the games that, of the reviews of Overwatch 2 that are in Chinese, that would almost certainly be the main complaint. But I don't feel like that is really the reasonable thing. It's even bumped up a little bit. It's 9% positive now. The peak today still has 46,000 players, so the people are playing it even if they're outwardly willing to write reviews and be unhappy about it. And then the graph here has only been around long enough for a week, so none of this is getting negated as a review bomb. Inherently, if Valve bent over backwards to say this was a review bomb, there would just be no reviews at all. And that's the thing, is you're never going to get another 150,000 reviews in the next 5-10 years on this game that are positive, or even 50% positive. And very noticeably, I can't think of a single game that ever got positive reviews many years later, after all the multiplayer content and all the microtransaction content had been removed and the game had been majorly improved. Like, if you're gonna make a bold change that might get reviewers to give your game a second look, you basically have to do it in the first 6 months. You have to go, we've tried this for a while, and then that is that. That didn't work. But yeah, I suppose if I was going to say try and select the language there, I don't know how that would really work. This is where I could use my translate plugin and you could see some translations here. Most of this doesn't seem like it's not translating particularly well. So yeah, either the translations there are particularly bad, or non-English reviews on Steam are particularly bad, and I don't know what you do with that. It is totally possible that both things are true, though. It is very, very possible that the Chinese or Asian languages not supported by Blizzard, which I don't know why the Chinese were. See, it says it is actually supported completely in Chinese. I know there was a whole NetEase kerfuffle, I think, with Blizzard, and maybe there's some bad blood there, but this looks like it totally supports Chinese now. Which, that's weird. That is really, really weird. So, the narrative, potentially, that Chinese reviewers are reviewing Overwatch badly because they don't support Chinese language is wrong, obviously. And that totally explains why I haven't heard anybody else propose that. Maybe there is some bad blood between NetEase. Maybe there was a real review bomb that started on Overwatch 2, and maybe you take, say, of this 150,000 reviews, let's just say 50,000 of those were done by some kind of organized review bomb, either by Chinese people who were upset between the breakup between Blizzard and NetEase, or just by random pranksters on the internet of no real other description. Almost certainly I would still think 100,000 of these are still legitimate people that are upset. I mean, it is beyond believable. If the reviews were, say, 51% positive, and then maybe you could say, yeah, maybe a review bomb would bump that up to 70% at best if you remove the review bomb, but man, that's not believable. Overwatch 2 is just a bad game. We've effectively known it's been a bad game for a long time now. It's not really a surprise. Nobody's been singing the praises of Overwatch 2. They've just been perhaps unable to review the game since it's been on the Battle.net launcher exclusively. up until this point. It is worth pointing out that Overwatch 2 is now the worst reviewed game on Steam, which apparently there's a website called the Hall of Shame that I'll pull up here. Just go ahead and see if I can find it. I've never been on this website, and I don't know if it's really worth trusting, but I did see somebody talk about it. So here we have the bottom 100 worst Steam games of all time according to Unfortunate Punters. I don't know what Unfortunate Punters really means there, but whatever. So you have Overwatch 2, we have War of Three Kingdoms, which apparently has sexual content, and then Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is in the 6th spot. And then Roller Coaster Tycoon World. I think the reason why people don't like that is because it's always online. Mirror 2 Project X. Wonder if this is supposed to be a name confusion adult game to that very popular, good selling game Mirror on Steam. Yeah, I bet that's the case, and Mirror 2 is probably not made by the same people. Dynasty Warriors 9. Deus Ex The Fall. Kind of surprising that that would even get mentioned. Some of these games, like Deus Ex The Fall, really, you'd think people weren't ever playing in the first place, but yeah, I guess that may not affect things too much if there's like one review and it's negative. It would then be at 0% popularity. Of course, noticeably here, that's not what's happening. Blood Bowl 3, I think that was a disappointment to fans who were hoping that. Blackgate Deluxe Edition. Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 1. Monopoly Plus, not being Monopoly. Let's see. A lot of these games I don't recognize. Artifact as a card battler from Valve, taking the 67th position. Torchlight 3. Agony for being censored after saying it wasn't going to be censored. A lot of these, I remember exact reasons why they're so negatively reviewed. Silent Hill Homecoming not being particularly good, I think. Might and Magic 4. Heroes 4 not being as good as 3. And I think in general might have some microtransaction things. Wonder if these logos mean something that I could understand. I can hover with the cursors, but the icons are so small. Whatever's popping up under it is just being blocked by my mouse cursor, which is bigger when I look at it than it is when it's recorded for some reason. Kerbal Space Program 2 being nowhere as good as the first game, an unnecessary sequel. Madden NFL 23, I'm not sure why people are super upset about that, but I could guess it probably is not much different than the previous Madden. No big surprises here in this list, and weirdly no big, not a lot of unknown games there either. Clearly there's a filter there to eliminate games that have sold one copy and have one negative review. Otherwise, there definitely should be some of that showing up. Part of the question certainly to ask there as far as the Hall of Shame though is how can you make that information actionable? That's the general goal you're going to want in if you're going to do anything as a content creator, is to say, hey, I've got a list of really bad games here. Can I do anything with that list? Is there some information with that list being updated on a daily basis, if not more often? Is there something that would be very helpful there? Well, you look at, say, like Jesse Cox's YouTube channel, and which in all fairness is still a million times more successful than my YouTube channel. But he does his 5-minute news, and in his 5-minute news, he's also handing over a minute to somebody else to talk about whatever they want. So he's really only doing 4 minutes of news, and sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it goes 20 or 30 minutes. It's a terrible name, to say the least. And just explaining the premise every episode is a waste of time. But yeah, if you're doing a presentation like that, a quick daily news thing, going through the worst list once a day might allow you to create some new content, although it is fairly negative, and I would much prefer to personally go through a best top selling list. But if you looked at the top selling list, you really would just hit the same games over and over again on a daily basis, and that's where the idea of trending, whatever you're going to define trending as, makes a lot more sense. Is things that have shot up in sales, even if they're not the best top sellers. Finishing up the Video Games Chronicle news articles, apparently the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection warns players that some content is considered outdated. The disclaimer notes that the creator's original vision hasn't been changed. Almost certainly this is the Japanese way of saying, hey, we're not changing anything, so don't try and cancel culture us when we have Solid Snake being sexist, or in general there's just some standard Japanese sexism, or I don't even know, might even be a little bit of racism in those games at some point, which in all fairness I would say it kind of feels like cancel culture lately has not had any big wins or any real even attempts at canceling things. Like most recently there was Kid Rock swearing he wasn't going to drink Coors, and they got a picture of Kid Rock drinking Coors beer out of a can. So even his small boycott is seemingly over. I'd imagine with politics and the elections around the corner, there's probably a lot of focus on that. And that alone. Oops. Really did not need to negate the effects of that card. The article actually goes to it. Here it says the disclaimer doesn't refer to sex scenes, that they are considered outdated, but they could refer to the way the series portrays some female characters portraying it, particularly in the first game where Snake often hits on women, and Dr. Naomi telling Snake that she can do a strip search on her if he completes his mission. So yeah, what once would have been considered just your standard cheesy flirting that you would see in like an 80s movie now is considered wholly inappropriate and offensive. The world certainly has changed a lot, particularly in fictional stories. At a certain level, I guess maybe in my youth, I may have actually thought that things like Porky's actually happened, but I think maybe I would, if anybody would actually believe that, if I actually ever believed that, I was being naive even then. I don't think I really did. Like, weird science, Porky's, those kinds of crazy scenarios clearly were farcical. But yeah, there's clearly people now that don't even want to have any kinds of fictional stories. Okay, I'm gonna flip this. And clearly, it must have just been a slow news week in general, because our last Video Games Chronicle article here, Bethesda executive and former World of Warcraft director clash over the Starfield's leaked title screen. Pete Hines refutes suggestion that the game's simple title screen shows that the team, quote, didn't care. I don't see any problem with this title screen. And in all fairness, I would also say I would suspect that the people who make the title screen have very little to do with the people who actually work on the game. It would make a lot of sense if the title screen was done by an advertisement company, or at least the advertisement department. Yeah, I think what's going to happen today is I'll probably just play off screen and try to get a little bit further in this battle, because this is ridiculous. This is taking forever. Inherently, if I'm going to evaluate this screen, you have this emphasis of a planet and a lot of emphasis of starfields and space, and then you have four characters that I, not knowing who these characters are, assume are very important characters. You also have a moon and eclipse or something happening over here. You've got a spaceship. It all gives kind of the form of, I wouldn't suggest it's being phallic, really. It feels more like a tree, but you certainly could go Freudian in it if you wanted to. But yeah, you have a focus on there being a robot, a focus on space outfits, you focus on different characters. That doesn't seem lazy. If you wanted to go lazy, it would just be a black screen on a Starfield and it would say Starfield. And regardless of how lazy you are with the title screen, doesn't matter. What they're promising in Starfield, if they actually deliver on any of that, is going to be the absolute opposite of laziness. Now, maybe there's a deeper sentimentality that can be dug into the idea of accusing Bethesda of being lazy, because I think in general that accusation kind of sticks in the past. Let's just face it. The best Fallout game is Fallout New Vegas, not made by Bethesda. The last successful game from the Elder Scrolls series is Skyrim, and they have been extremely lazy around the Elder Scrolls series, in that they have not made anything new and just resold those Skyrim over and over again. And inherently, when you look at Skyrim, which is probably your best example of this, even though it is very similar and prominent in at least Fallout 3, the game I played most recently, can speak to, that there is a level of laziness in that they want to make systems in the same way that I want to make macros. They want to make systems that allow them to put random garbage in places instead of having to handcraft and make bespoke locations with bespoke items in bespoke locations. It is definitely not as much the hand of an artist making sure that every brush stroke is where he wants it, as much as it is the hand of an algorithm just placing things around and then giving it the once over and saying that's good enough. So yeah, you could definitely say there's some laziness there in the way games from Bethesda are made. You could say there's some laziness in the way the stories have been written there. There is almost certainly some laziness in Bethesda games in that they try to make giant games with very little happening and a lot of empty spaces, and then sell their games as if they are way more polished experiences than they really are. But it is utterly ridiculous to talk about the title screen. And it is very much ridiculous for anybody in the game industry, or formerly in the game industry, as far as the former World of Warcraft director Mark Kern, to take shots here. I imagine he thought he was being deep, but honestly, if you're working in the industry, you should never cross the line and try and be a video game critic. In my personal opinion, if you're a video game critic, you should never cross the line and try and work in the game industry. Cool guy on the internet's on the chat. He says, I summon Dark Magician. If only. But yeah. The video game industry is very insular and a very small group of people, so if you want to work in the video game industry, you need the glad hand. You need to be buddy with everybody and just drink the Kool-Aid a little bit and live in that world, to the point where you need to spout the same politics that other game developers make and just agree with everybody and really have that Hollywood mentality in which you always agree to people in at least to their face and make everybody feel like you're all best friends. If you want to be a video game critic, then you're going to have to say some negative things, and probably a lot of it as a video game critic, and people who are video game critics probably shouldn't ever try to create anything themselves. Because you all built up, at the very least, so much negative sentimentality amongst other game developers that they would shoot you down. And that almost certainly feels like what this is that Mark Kern here had some kind of bad relationship with somebody at Bethesda or ZeniMax, and so now he's taking pot shots on Twitter. The start screen of a game can reveal a lot about how rushed the team was and how much pride they took in their work, Kern wrote. I pretty much disagree with that completely. Like, I would have to really Google a list of amazing start screens in games to even begin to try and figure out one that is worth mentioning. Start screens basically mean nothing at all in most cases. Shadow of the Tomb Raider had a pretty awful start screen. It's fine. It has nothing to do with the rest of the game. Trine has a start screen where you can run around and practice things. It's fine. It has very little to do with the rest of the game. Significant Nintendo games barely have start screens at all, going instead for cutscenes that would play as the game is installing and loading further. Yeah. Every mobile game with a start screen has been, for the most part, insignificant. There are some games that are somewhat impressive in that you press start or you press A to start and then you jump right into the gameplay, and that's nice, but if it, by Kern's argument, that would be a case where you didn't put any time on the start screen and title screen. Inherently, start screens should go away. Like, they've I'm not sure ever really needed to exist, but they've long outlived their usefulness. Like, the idea that there would be a computer or a console or mobile phone that wouldn't have a hard drive in it, so you need a start screen as a way of having a game have something it can show at a kiosk at a GameStop for kids to play with, even if a hard drive isn't installed, is just an archaic way of thinking. Yes, you don't want a game to load and immediately crash, but you can make a lot more assumptions these days as far as all of that is concerned, and in a lot of cases it makes way more sense for you to say, put in a Zelda-like fantasy game, put the disc in, and then it immediately just loads into a big open world, and you have a Zelda-like fantasy character just standing on a cliff looking over that world, and you just are seeing the beginning of the game that way. And yeah, you can certainly program it in such a way that if you had a Zelda-like character standing on the edge of a cliff looking over a giant overworld map, that he would be safe until he takes his first few steps. Enemies won't spawn in that area and won't attack you, things like that. But yeah, there is, in my mind, no inherent reason why you need something that says press A to start, or anything like that. Anything that would actually break immersions, which inherently that is what the start screen is doing. Let's continue listening to Kern, and I guess picking apart his argument. You win on start screens are often done at the very end of development. Teams are too busy making the core game. It's quite common for the start screen to completely change once the game is shipping or on patch 0. Patch 0 is an odd term. Teams that take pride, want to put a good face forward, will often redo them just prior to the game going live. I would question what the World of Warcraft start screens even looked like. I never played World of Warcraft, but inherently, I feel like he's really talking out of his butt here. Like, sure, some teams may take pride in the start screen. Some teams may be rushing to do it as the last second. But it feels very nitpicky. Inherently, if you want to complain about Starfield, wait till the game is out. It's almost certainly going to disappoint some people. It's not going to be as long as people think. Its story probably won't be as interesting as people think. I doubt its variety of sci-fi concepts are going to be groundbreaking. It's probably going to be very simplistic, faster than light travel concepts and robotic aliens and slightly weird aliens. I wouldn't be surprised if actually Starfield barely has any alien species at all, and if you were to compare it to something like Mass Effect's, the alien species very possibly aren't going to be that interesting if we see any alien species at all. Kern's comments attracted criticism, I think rightfully so. Maybe you should not speak publicly. Inherently, I would say if you are working for a video game company, or if you've ever worked in a video game company, you probably should be trained to not post public statements at all, or be trained to post very benign public statements. I guess inherently we're at this point now. Even if you're like working at a McDonald's, you should be getting training from the McDonald's as far as here's our corporate secrets policy, and here's our recommendations on what you should post about and what you shouldn't post about, just to avoid any conflict in the future. Of course, there's been plenty of people who have complained about their job and then been fired because they allegedly violated some kind of corporate secret rule. I feel like Kern here doesn't actually work for Blizzard anymore and is really just taking pot shots anyways. Bethesda's head of publishing, Pete Hines, refuted the suggestion the title screen was meant a team either didn't care or was too rushed to complete it, or they designed what they wanted, and that's been our menu for years and was one of the first things we settled on. So they're saying they designed this menu and they've been sticking with it for years and they're happy with it. Again, when you look at that picture, there's really nothing wrong with this at all. It does, to me, feel like there's almost going to be a split here between two factions, and that there almost should be some settings options on the side and some other settings options on the other side. Maybe even like a two-player co-op implication, because you are very much just splitting things down the middle. Again, I'm just activating everything. Here's the Dark Magicians summoned. Yep. Now, if they're talking about this start screen, where it's a circle with Starfield on it and a sun and a menu, instead of this being a start screen, well, I guess maybe I could be a little bit more lenient on that. Let's see if we can actually... This would be great if there was downvotes on posts too, but as many people quoted it as many people liked it. Okay, I can kind of see what he's thinking there. I think he's putting way too much emphasis on it. Again, if you're going to complain about the laziness of Bethesda, there's almost certainly something more you could say about previous Bethesda games or even Starfield. It feels like this guy immediately is trying to complain before he's even started to play the game. And inherently, if this is the title screen, you've got your little Bethesda logo here, which adds something. You've got your background lens flare. You've got this giant text here. Arguably, maybe this text should be down at the bottom, and maybe the menu options should be at the top. But you have a lot of blackness over here, so menu options going over here too. It's not really that. You're certainly coming out with quite a venom, suggesting that the team didn't care, with no evidence at all. Does seem like it's a simplistic logo start screen, but whatever. Yeah, the quote goes, having an opinion is one thing, questioning reality developers care because you would have done it differently is highly unprofessional coming from another quote-unquote dev, which is definitely snapping back with the quotes on being a dev. There's another comment here that was deleted. In Exile said the campaign will now be 45 minutes long, but the start screen will be 20 plus hours. Yeah. Inherently, what the mistake here too is to make a lot of assumptions too. Yeah. A great example of this almost certainly is that a lot of times I'll end up saying the exact same things when covering a game. And one of the things I'll say in different words, almost always, is that it feels like there's a lot of times 2 or more teams that work on a game. I think in most cases there are usually 2 or 3 teams of secret second-party developers, third-party developers that make parts of a game. Or there'll be a feeling that there's 2 people that liked an idea and then went in 2 different directions in that idea. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you have a lot of challenge tombs where there's a big column in the middle that you have to climb to the top of. You get about 4 or 5 challenge tombs with that same concept. I would assume that's 4 or 5 people all liked that general idea and were allowed to make separate challenge tombs around the same idea, which made 4 or 5 of the challenge tombs feel very repetitive. And at a certain level, that's the director's fault for not saying, hey, we need some more variety here. This feels like we are just doing variations on the same theme over and over again. But what I hope I've never done when saying something like that is given any level of certainty on it. I almost certainly have said I often feel that this is the case. I don't have any evidence of this case. And I've never, as a critic, to my knowledge, said I feel like the developers didn't care. Although, in all fairness, I will say a lot of the garbage asset flips that we look at on Steam, I have used verbiage that is very much like that, where it visually looks like to me that the developers didn't care. And I'm willing to go out on a limb and make that accusation because I'm not important enough for people to call me out on it, in part, but also because I think most people would agree with that guess. But yeah, inherently when you see people just trying to start a fight or sling mud, I often feel like they've picked up a rock to throw through a window when there was a brick handy on the ground too. Like, and that's what this whole start screen complaint really feels like. Is if you wanted to complain about Bethesda, if you wanted to complain about laziness amongst Bethesda, you go back to horse armor, you go back to greediness. There's just there's just a long list of things that would be better to criticize Bethesda for than the start screen. But let's do a little bit of Google research here. I typed in best video game start screens. The first link is the 13 best video game start screens of all time, ranked by GameRant. Alright, being able to play around with Mario's face in Super Mario 64, it's pretty good. Noticeably, Skyrim Press Start is also being shown here. Hotline Miami, I don't see anything particularly special there. Papers, Please, I don't see anything particularly special there. Would it in any way make sense to assume that the solo programmer and creator of Papers, Please didn't care about his start screen? I don't think that would be fair at all. But yeah, in the opposite direction, I also don't feel like there's anything particularly special about that smart start screen. Animal Crossing, a lot of this is just going to come down to art. Mario Paint, either it's going to be art or they're going to be more interactable. Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, here's Bethesda's Skyrim start screen. Yeah, it's basically just a symbol, Bethesda in the corner. These are really start screens of just really popular games. That seems to be the only real requirement in this rank, is to say, hey, do you have nostalgia for these games, or would this be good search engine optimization to list these games in a different way? Last of Us start screen. Yeah, I didn't even know that was the start screen for Last of Us. Looks kind of good. Doesn't really do much for us. Portal 2 start screen. It maybe gives you a small hint of what's going to happen in Portal 2. And then Halo's start screen. Final Fantasy VII's start screen. Yeah. Notably, this Mario 64 start screen is about the only one that makes any real interesting impact. And effectively, that's just because it is a tech demo that they've added as an Easter egg. So, if Mario 64 is number 2, what's number 1? Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time has part of the problem here, I would say, is that each of these start screens are static images when Ocarina of Time in particular was an animated video that was playing in the background. But yeah. There almost certainly are way better start screens than that for way less known games. Here's a spin-off thought. Best startup console screens with the GameCube dancing around, or the Sony. It's almost going to be 100% nostalgic based on which ones of those you like. They're all kind of animated and playful. A lot of them are. To perhaps hide things. Notably, the Steam Deck lets you load in different start screens when you boot up the system start videos. Guess you'd call those boot videos. Yeah. Again, that's going to be 100% nostalgia based, though, as far as just which one do you remember, which one did you see a lot of. I'd say the system boot ups logos videos might even do a better job of creating hype and anticipation in players than the title screen of I'd say the title screens of individual games are more likely skipped. So we have a very interactive one. So we have the beginning of what looks like a Mega Man game, Mega Man 2. And they're doing a much better job of showing off just like the animated aspect to this. Super Mario Bros. 3, showing off action, highlighting ideas. You can see how the Last of Us title screen here makes a lot more sense when it's in movement. But they're all very simplistic here. I don't even know what this is. It says Naughty Dog. Is this Uncharted? Oh, this is Last of Us 2. You have God of War. Which I assume when you start a new game, he swings his axe into the tree. Yep. If anything, it does just feel like you would skip most of this. And I think I pretty much do skip start screens. Loading screens arguably have more importance. You end up watching more of those, and they potentially could be very helpful, but often they are just annoying and boring. In that case, at least the Bayonetta practice your moves loading screen is somewhat noticeable and nice. And then due to patents, most loading screens really suck instead of having mini games or some kind of other concept in between them. And nobody's really making an argument that they want to see loading screens at all. They would prefer games to not have them. They prefer games to never break from the narrative dissonance, or create narrative dissonance, or whatever the right phrase it would be to use that, to say there. Let's see. What is this? Resident Evil? No, Chrono Trigger. Yes, I would say older games probably put a little bit more work into the start screens, because in the case of Chrono Trigger in particular, you're straight up then playing just in a 16-bit or 8-bit RPG game after the fact, and a start screen can potentially give the impression of more polish than you actually can create in your game. In the same way that thumbnails on Steam can make a game look better than it actually is. But it is all very surface level. It's just Christmas wrapping paper. This Cuphead start screen, pretty great. And it gives you a general idea of what the visual style of the game is going to be. That being said, it really doesn't do anything compared to the actual experience of playing Cuphead. Doesn't show any of the platforming or any of that. If anything, there is a pretty obvious desire here, in most cases, to be fairly minimal, which only puts Kern's argument further and further in the trash bin. And that these are old articles of the best title screens. None of these are brand new articles that came out after Kern's statement. This is Dragon Age Inquisition. I was trying to figure out what that was. Braid. Yep. Pretty good start screen, and noticeably in this start screen, when you press start, that is where you start in the game too. But yeah, here's Ocarina of Time, showing off what would have been for its time very good graphics. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's more than enough research to really just shoot in the foot this complaint. Again, this Starfield start screen. If you want to complain about this, complain about the fact that you've got a pop-up box here that probably will have advertisements for something in it always, or that you, I mean, it's not really too much more. You could say maybe the font choice and all of that doesn't make a lot of sense. I could see if there is an interface where you control your spaceship in Starfield, I bet the interface doesn't look like this menu. You could have potentially integrated that font style and maybe some hologram looking computer menus for what you select, but that's about it. A minimalistic start screen seems to be very much preferred by at least other people writing articles before this, talking about game start screens. Although notably, that's about 10 minutes I've spent at least more talking and thinking about start screens than I ever have in my life. They really are just not that consequential. Moving on to the Gamatsu articles, and I think this will probably be our last Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. Just not getting anywhere with it. Let's see. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R DLC character Leon Abacchio has been announced. We saw that article before. Infinity Strash's Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai details the Dark Army commanders and Dragon Masters, if you want to check out that article. Looks like several monster looking characters. The game called Pacific Drive has been delayed to early 2024. the Otome young maiden visual novel called Of the Red, the Light, and the Ayakashi Suzuri has been announced for the Switch and PC. Which, okay. When they say PC, they mean Steam. I have no idea what Ayakashi Suzuri means. No. That seems to me like that's the name of a person. Game called Break Arts 3 has been announced for PC. It's a battle racing and robot customization game. See if we can see it on Steam. The one thought that concerns me about making YouTube shorts that are going to only be 29 days ahead is that you'll get something like this that's announced, and then I'll make a YouTube short on it and then make that announcement that a game has been announced, and then it's not coming out for 6 months to a year, if not longer. But whatever. I mean, at a certain level, if it says to be announced, it'll just say to be announced on the YouTube shorts anyways, and so people will just have to deal with it. This Break Arts game definitely feels like it's for fans of people customizing robots more than really racing them, because the tracks on the racing part is severely under-focused here over the customization of the robot. Alright, well that is it for me. We had one network disconnect that got us about 500 more medals, and then maybe we struggled to get 200 or 300 more, but at the moment we have 2150. I want to get to 5,500. We've got 7 days to do it, but it definitely seems like it's going to be quite the struggle. And it's not like I can build a deck to do anything there. Meanwhile, probably don't have the motivation or time or interest in playing ranked, so once again I doubt I'm going to get any higher than the level rank I'm already at. It just probably makes more sense not to play at all. And for the versus event, we have now destroyed enough cards and done everything to clear off most of these event things. Noticeably though, I've only won 2 out of 10 victories, so even they know that these versus events are just way too difficult. And yeah, I'm almost certainly not going to get 2,000 points either for the dark group or the light group, so forget about getting dark side or light side, which aren't really even titles I care about. And all the daily quests are done. We have hit a point here now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where this event needs to go away, this needs to go away. Discovery, since it's been completely done, probably needs to go away, even though I think there's some information here that will keep it from going away. The lifetime events, for the most part, are very slowly working their way to their next steps. A lot of those feel like they're somewhat close to being their final steps. But a year and a half it feels like we've been playing this game, and we're not really doing a lot to get up to level 50 or anything like that. Do have a decent amount of gems, and and another couple levels on the Duel Pass. Yeah. Definitely was hoping for more victories, though, on the Versus event. Alright, let's just solely focus on the news then, which there isn't a ton of it. There's about 5 more Gematsu articles and 1 GameDeveloper.com articles. Apparently the star named EOS has been delayed to 2024, and it's going to be published by Playism, which don't feel like I've heard about this game, and we'll see if it's on the fall list. That will be the indicator going forward. Nope, I don't recognize this game. Looks like it might be an interesting little puzzle game, but very noticeably we're also hitting a point where we're going to have a decent amount of games just get delayed. It is more going to feel like a season of delays from now to the end of the year than it is going to feel like a season of games actually getting released, unfortunately. I suspect that's what's going to happen. Particularly now that Starfield is out or almost out, and I could see a lot of people playing Starfield and forgetting about everything else. I could see people seeing success around Starfield and then pushing their games. Although, inherently, if you planned on releasing your game before the end of the year, fiscally, you really can't push it that much. But I also would heavily question an assumption there that I'm making, and that Starfield is that anticipated or that big of a game. There just really aren't big games anymore. There's a couple Call of Duties and things like that, but for the most part, I think video gamers are just way more diverse on what they want to play and what they're willing to pay for on day one than they used to be. A game called Fight Crab 2 has been announced for PC, which, let's look at the Steam page there. They are fairly realistic looking crabs in their skin and exoskeleton, while it looks like fairly silly things they're doing. This feels like a bit of a joke game, but not so unpolished that it doesn't at least deserve a YouTube short. This is all being published by Playism, so Playism obviously has a series of announcements. Eden.schemata as a function launches in 2024 as like a programming function. You have a dot function here with a semicolon at the end. Solve the murder in the science fiction mystery adventure game. But they're calling it an action roguelike hack and slash game. Wait a minute. That's because I clicked on this link and it brought me to a completely different game. Metalbringer. They've got the wrong link here. This should be Eden.schemata. Which, yeah. Gematsu is run by one guy, so I can kind of make an excuse for him making such a mistake, but I could even suspect that Playism themselves did it wrong, but it's the first time I've ever seen them make a mistake like that. Let's see. I'll just Google it. Then Yeah. There might be something to this, but also I'm seeing maybe some problems here in that the art style doesn't look as polished as I would like it to look. There's not a lot of variety of characters, and there's not a lot of variety of background images. Seems like you might very well just be trapped in a laboratory for most of the story. I imagine we'll see an article about Metalbringer too, but we'll go ahead and put that on the fall list. There it is. Playism and Alpha Wing announce a roguelike action game called Metalbringer for PC. When I click on this, let's just see. That link actually does work. Although weirdly, my plugin to stop me from making duplicate tabs is not working, because I've made duplicate tabs there and it didn't do anything. Which arguably, maybe I should just disable that plugin. I am definitely trying to use as few plugins as possible, which is still a ton of plugins, but using as few as possible would be helpful. Use less RAM per tab, because every time you make a new tab in Firefox or Chrome, it's going to load in a new sandboxed version of that plugin and take up more RAM. I wish there was a way to say only specific domains should use the plugin across the board. Some plugins are programmed that way, so you do whitelist or blacklist specific, or allow list, block lists, I guess. Yeah, they did try to push us to stop saying whitelists and blacklists as a term. And it kind of makes sense. Allow lists and block lists makes more sense in most cases. But yeah, by default, that's not how plugins work in Firefox. So you can't just say as a control listing, a control option. I'm rambling now. Moving on. Phantom Rose 2 Sapphire launches October 30th. Yep. This looks like this is a fighting game, but it's labeled as a roguelite. It really looks like a different art style. I'm not sure I'm 100% sold. It's an art style I'm interested in. The other question certainly is what happened to Phantom Rose 1 as a game, because why are you making a second deck building roguelike game in a series? Why make a series of those type of games in the first place? 34 Everlaughs launches in 2024 and is going to be published by Playism. It's a super condensed looping action adventure. That's what they're describing it as. What does that even mean, though? Super concentrated. I said condensed. I misread the word. Action entertainment for busy working adults. The game is an action adventure game where the discoveries and actions unravel a complex and intertwined world of breathless action in a dying world. Boy, that's a weird description to say the least. These screenshots don't really mean anything to me at all. Yeah. This might be interesting, but it very well might be nothing. We get a little bit of action here just to see what in the world they're going for here. You have really hyper realistic images being shown, and then you seem to show just very simplistic 2D depictions when humans are interacting. Seems very, very disconnected in the two scenes. I really have to kind of lean towards thinking that this might be almost a music-based quick-time event game where you're going to see a lot of high action sequences, but the actual interaction is just going to be press A here or there. It did look like there might be some sword hack and slash elements, so that may be the actual gameplay mechanic instead of my speculation. That would be a better guess. But yeah, that looks like a weird one. And this puts me in a weird position too, because I don't recall if I put this on the follow list just now or if it was already on the follow list. So I'm going to just have to risk it and make another YouTube short, unless I want to make an argument not to make a YouTube short at all around it, which I don't think I can make that argument. And then this week's Japanese game releases, all of these names. Let's just scroll down to the list and read it there. Armored Core 5, Fires of the Rubicon, DC3 PS Da Capo 3 Plus Story, Immortals of Avium, and then Kuramaruka Circle, Kimco RPG Selection 4, Killer Frequency Ride 5, and Shirogane Spirits. This is Da Capo 3 Plus for Switch. You know, we haven't seen any major talk of censorship for PS5 versions of games where the Switch versions come out uncensored, although noticeably in the case of Da Capo 3 and a lot of games, you're really seeing only PS4 versions of games coming out, and they're not really bothering for PS5. And if that became the industry standard, it wouldn't be a terrible thought, frankly, if simple games like anime visual novels did just get released on previous generation, because there's no way they would actually push the graphics or the CPU of a PlayStation 5 to any real level. But inherently that does make an argument that there should be something more like a PlayStation Plus. No, not PlayStation Plus. There should be a new PlayStation Portable device for those simplistic types of games, like Lenovo Steam Deck Competitor. Let's see. Let's look at this one. I remembered this story. So there was these leaked images of a Lenovo Steam Deck Switch competitor that maybe will connect to augmented reality glasses. And it's straight up, if these are real images, has Joy-Cons that disconnect. But notably, there's some differences here too. You're seeing what looks like extra grip for bigger hands, extra triggers too. There is, and this is something I've said controllers needed more than anything, I believe a scroll wheel either here or here, which with any game where you have to select through a bunch of items, a bunch of weapons or things like that, it does make a lot of sense. There is, I believe this is a touchpad. There's analog sticks that pop up really big, And unlike the Joy-Cons from the Nintendo Switch, or Joy-Cons in general, those are the only real Joy-Cons. Like, the layout here isn't trying to be exactly the same on both sides. There's a kickstand, like the Switch OLED model, also. But yeah, it is a very thick device if real, in that these look like two USB-C plugs on top of each other at the top. See if we can maybe get the picture a little bit bigger. Not really. Now I guess the question is, would you for a second want to trust Lenovo to make a Steam Deck competitor? Maybe. Particularly if a new Steam Deck comes out and it doesn't have if it's even smaller for smaller hands for little kids, and they never came out with a Switch that was bigger for bigger hands, really. I could see maybe adults saying, let's try something different, but then you lose all your Nintendo's first party titles if you went with a Lenovo Steam Deck competitor. I do think the idea of an augmented glasses makes some sense, but at a certain level, if you're going to have augmented glasses, then why have the screen in the first place? But yeah, I imagine you could probably plug in a augmented reality glass set right now to a Steam Deck. Maybe it's not got the drivers, but nothing really would stop that from happening. But yeah, it's an interesting thought. Another thing to take note from is the 8BitDo adapter, the second generation adapter that allows you to use a PlayStation controller or an Xbox Core controller on the Nintendo Switch. It's a little USB thing you plug into the dock. That adapter is on sale right now, which might speak to a case that there's something that 8BitDo may have seen about the next Nintendo console that means either it won't need an adapter and you will just be able to directly connect Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signal controllers from the Xbox and PlayStation to the next Nintendo console, or it's not going to need those kinds of connections or support those kinds of connections in the first place. Which I don't know what that you can really get from that. If that turns out to be true, we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I still think there is a fairly high chance that Nintendo comes out with a new console that is very different from the Switch, and in particular is intentionally very different from the Switch, so they don't have to support backward compatibility with Switch games. And then we have only one, nope, we don't have any GameDeveloper.com articles for today. Again, starting early, so there's a decent chance that when Wednesday comes around, we'll have a lot of news. Way too much news then. We can do our follow list cleanup with the auto blur enabled. Let's see, we've got a game called Jackaxe, which I guess the question is this really a style of game I would want to play? Because it does kind of come off as like an NES style game, and I've never really felt like I really was going to want to play those old school feeling games or old school looking games. See, it kind of feels like it's a Shovel Knight inspired game. lady with an axe. She throws the axe, and then that lets her teleport herself up for a lot of precision platforming, and I just don't like precision platforming games. Notably, I would say this isn't very relevant either. So, yeah. Fortunately, I have to say no because I know I just would not enjoy that experience. I do enjoy the idea of the character. The main character being named Jack as a Viking helmeted, even though Vikings never really wore that helmet, lady with a giant axe. Next we have Jack in Hat. We're clearly going through everything that starts with J, and for my dirtier mentality, I'm assuming anything with Jack in the name is trying to make a joke there. Although it doesn't seem like there actually is a case for that so far. This one obviously is mixed, so that's not reviewed well with enough reviews anyways. So we'll get rid of that. And then we have Iteria Zone. Now what's funny is, yes, last time we streamed we were already into the eyes. So if we were back to J's, I don't know how that would have happened. Because when I do this cleanup, the macro that I've run to bring that up, which is a macro that's been very solid and I haven't had to tweak since I first made it, thank goodness. But when it looks for the name of the last game it covered, it only jumps backwards if no, it doesn't jump backwards looking for the name. It jumps backwards at the position looking for the same name, so it takes a few steps back before going forward in case some things are moved around, but that's it. So I have no idea why we were looking at J name games there. Iteria Zone is nothing. Itadaki Smash isn't relevant enough. It doesn't have enough games. It's on You. Narrative driven full motion video game. It's not relevant enough. I am starting to feel myself get sleepy at this point. And I definitely don't feel like I'm super high energy today. Short story inspired by David Whale's Home is Where One Starts. While recalling good memories of your childhood, explore the map in search of parts for the car that was left by a loved one for you. Well, this one is positive enough. It is basically just a walking simulator, but I'll put it on the wish list. We have a game here called Is It Ticking, which looks like it's a more actually scientifically based circuit bomb diffusion game with circuit logic. It is single player only. So this is like inspired by something like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, but there isn't just a ridiculous amount of puzzles in it that don't really make sense. Like this is, for the most part, looks like real circuitry. Although you have like a battery here that seems not to actually be grounded to anything. Well, this is positive enough, certainly, to Put on the wish list. Let's see. Isometric nonogram, I think we can say no to just because it isn't reviewed by enough people. Plus, that's not a big loss. ISO, it's from November. I want to give this a little bit more time, but it's probably never going to get enough reviews. And then Islets, as a Metroidvania, is overwhelmingly positive. It's very noticeable here that just the vast larger number of reviews for this game than any of the other games we looked at so far on the wish list. And that makes an easy decision. Then we have Islands of Insight, which is labeled as coming soon. But honestly, I could not tell you if this was announced, say, 2 weeks ago, 2 days ago, or 2 years ago. I wish SteamDB would tell me. Actually, I think this was just a couple of days ago that this game was announced. A game where you're flying around and playing a lot of puzzles like The Witness. It feels like a lot like The Witness. And there might very well be some logic to allowing a player to fly around from location to location to solve puzzles. It also seems like you're chasing off of a bunch of orbs, trying to collect them. Alright, well then we'll just go through all the new games that came out on Steam and then we'll be done for the day. So we have a game called Heartwood Online, which is already mixed, so don't really have to go any further on that. I know I saw several adult games that probably came out over the weekend, so we'll try and cover those quickly. Legend of Heroes, just looks like a mobile phone game of no interest. Let's see. And here's our first game that feels like there's some maybe adult content in it. Immediately here, it's giving you explanations on how to fix the game as far as it not running correctly. If the game freezes, try to use shift control to unfreeze it. Which, yeah, that shouldn't be your solution to something like that. So yeah, you can see that this is basically an 8-bit kind of RPG maker game, saying it's tagged with sexual content and nudity. And when you look at the background, there's just what I feel like is no real care or visual polish there. And then the foreground is where all your visual polish is. There you have giant boobed lady. And then this is really what the game is. So yeah, Dragon Princess is hungry. Not making it anywhere. Next we have a game called Roach Squared, which apparently is a rhythm game, but it looks like very little effort was put into writing the text with just 4 words, and I'm not seeing a lot here in the screenshots. Although noticeably, when you look at this, the thumbnails always look pretty great. Eris Dysnomnia. Looks like it's a hack and slash game. But again, not a lot of visual polish. Alright, our first truly adult game in the adult section, called Sex Story Cuckold Life Episode 3. 3D CGI characters, maybe maybe they have some movement in some scenes. Natural skin color. And is there much else to really say here? No, not really. It's $2.09. It's the third episode. It supports English only. No telling how long these things are, but I suspect they aren't very long. If I was to guess, you're getting somewhere between 30 minutes and 2 hours of a story at best. And mostly, at worst, you're just getting tricked into buying something that looks like it might be something when it really isn't. Yokai Art Survival Prologue is probably a prologue demo game. Definitely feels like a mobile game with all the visual elements and text and characters. Maybe it's a Chinese game. It's free. Japanese full audio. Yeah. I guess it's a lane defense game. Like Plants vs. Zombies. Which isn't the worst thought ever. I could definitely see if you wanted just these little chibi anime characters to be your army. You can see that having some appeal. I don't know why they call this tower defense though. There's too many games that are described as tower defenses that are drastically different. Regardless, that's not a game really worth playing in my book. Skyfighter Arcade doesn't look like anything. Broken Spectre looks like it's a VR horror game of some sort. Looks polished. One of my YouTube shorts was of a horror game, and it surprisingly got more views than I thought it really would. And so far, no complaints about talking about VR games, which is nice. I still have no idea why somebody felt the need to put a comment ranting about how a VR game is not considered a PC game. Particularly when you're talking about VR games on Steam that need a PC to work. VR Dinosaur City War is nothing. Next we have another adult game called Sex Hotel Simulator, which it does indicate no bundling there, in that we had several games between the two adult games. So it's a tiny tower game in the sense that you're running a hotel. They are 3D characters but more flat, which means nothing to say that. That's contradictory. The adult scenes seem to be 3D CGI scenes, and they seem to be more fetish focused and maybe a little bit more polished. But then there are also sections where you're talking to a 2D, more natural color palette characters. Definitely feels like the characters are drawn in a 2D form, that to be as similar as possible to the 3D images, which kind of works fairly well. But then when you're actually playing the game, they're really tiny 2D, more cartoony style of characters. So you've got like 3 different art styles here in between. Seems to be a lot of bondage in it too. Some girl on girl. This game is mostly positive. It has 115 reviews and it's 78% positive. And I think that's probably because there seems to be a lot of scenes, adult scenes, and a lot of variety, and an actual game here. Sex Hotel Simulator is $6.19. It says it has English full audio support. So yeah, I do definitely question on these adult games just how long you really would want to play any of them. And that's something I'm not sure I really understand. I'm gonna put this game on the fall list. I don't know why. I just want to see how many more reviews potentially it would get and how the reviews would go. But yeah, it seems like it's a fairly good quality adult game in the minefield that is the adult section of Steam. Clay Monkey and the Master Potter and the Kiln God, which sounds like a Chinese game. Chinese parable. But it's English only. I really have to throw up my hands in confusion on this one and say I just don't see anything here. Like I don't know what this is all coming from, what this story is about, if it's an original story or if this is based off some parable I've never heard. But the actual game just does not look like anything. And we have yet another adult game, this one called Femdom University Zero, which is kind of a top-down 16-bit RPG game from the looks of it. They're calling it an open-world survival dating sim game. It is flat 2D, slightly more colorful, but still very much in a Western style or Western animator. Does feel a little bit more inspired by the colorful palettes of anime characters, but definitely a Western animator. Yeah, it still definitely has a lot of like a lot of RPG Maker feeling to it. And the shoe drops here in that the game is being sold for $149.99. Let me just show that so you don't know I'm lying here. $149.99. Maybe that's supposed to be a typo, but even at $14.99, it's not. That would be too expensive. $1.49, that would be a little too cheap. The idea of femdoms certainly would have an appeal. It does definitely feel like this is a attempt at, what am I trying to say here? At appealing at way too high of a price, and an attempt to have like real scenarios here. We can actually show this part here, I guess. So you can play as a boy and girl, and then begging is a big thing. Beg for food, beg for clothes. This is the 16-bit RPG Maker style. You're really going to play the game in it. Seems like there will be really some femdoms scenarios, but it seems to me like part of what they're trying to sell you on, and this is a yandere simulator type situation, in that they're trying to get you to pay $150 for Femdom U0 so that they theoretically would have enough funding to make a FIMU1 that is going to be fully in 3D, which that almost certainly would not happen. That is just no way to really that is not really a way to fund the development of a game like that. Inherently, if all the gameplay mechanics were ripped out of this game, you could have just made a whole bunch of scenes and then tried to promise more of gameplay in 3D later, but the jump between 2D and 3D really should never happen. So yeah, that game is obviously way too expensive to put on a fault list or even give any more thought to. Last Broadcast is a weird looking game, but I like weird, so I'll give it a chance. It's also free. Arguably, maybe I shouldn't make YouTube shorts around free games, but I'm definitely not really willing to draw that line yet. Here we have a collection of Zumba and card games, Zuma, or whatever it's called. Maybe some hidden object games too. I'll make a YouTube short on that, but I'm not going to put it on the follow list. Gamma Blade. That's not the game we saw before. It's a shoot 'em up game. I really do hate this when I'm just kind of half asleep and it feels even particularly low energy for me. And I'm pretty calm and low energy to start with. I'm definitely not what the stereotypical YouTuber used to be, although most YouTubers themselves have kind of calmed down a little bit also, but yeah, I definitely don't feel like I'm moving fast enough or talking fast enough or putting enough energy into it. PewDiePie was collabing with a guy where he was just eating a bunch of sushi, and about halfway through with it, I was just so bored I stopped watching because they weren't saying anything about the sushi really or putting any real emotion into it. It was just like, hey, we're gonna eat some sushi for you and put it on TV, put it on YouTube. I think I'm gonna say no to Heartless and Dreadful. Made mostly by one person, this game says. If it was made mostly by one person, you have to at that point just say made by a small team. Don't try to go the other direction there. Just say small team and give credit to the other people instead of trying to take credit away. Well, we have what looks like yet another Chinese adult game that pretends like there's actual nudity in it, but there really isn't. Or just another game that is not in the right section because it should be in the adult section. I guess I'll let you decide here. Zombie Sanctuary Ash. There you have a 3D CGI character in a bikini thong, which definitely screams Chinese adult game. And there's just a ton of particles flying all over the place in this weirdly not top-down action shooter game. Yep. And it's claiming it has full audio for all 103 or so languages. that Steam supports, which is almost certainly not the way full audio should be labeled. But yeah, obviously this is a garbage game. Arrow of row. Shoot arrows in the course in a row, or maybe 2 rows, or maybe 3. This is just that mobile game that you see people advertise all the time, where you shoot forward and go through gates, and the gates give you bonuses. Maybe there's a little bit more going on this non-mobile version of that, but very often you'll see this advertisement for games that look like this, and they just don't actually play or work like that. And to the point where it seems so ridiculous that they don't just make the game actually work the way the commercials work. I just don't see the reason why you would bait and switch when, if you keep them on one game long enough, they'll see enough ads to other games anyways. And inherently, all those games you see ads for are connected to the same ad network, so they'll advertise other bait and switch garbage games. So you get into this death spiral, effectively, of bad quality games being advertised to you. Bushido Saga, The Nightmare of the Samurai. This probably isn't anything, but I'll give it a chance. Animarama. Interactive puzzle game. Help characters solve their problems. Yeah, I'll give it a chance. I'm being extremely generous today. This one looks like this is probably an asset flip. Game is what I would guess. So yeah, it looks like it's a asset flip Chinese puzzle game. Nothing there of interest. Embassy, I think we can say no to. Yeah. Pteranodon. Single player first person shooter where you're fighting a dinosaur, but only one dinosaur. Well, that's weird. Again, I guess I like weird. Shinobi Scholar of Joseon. Sounds like a very Asian looking game. English and Korean. I guess Korean looking game. Alright. I'll give it a chance. And then once again, we're back to an adult section game. So weirdly, I've always felt like most of these adult games were getting bundled together, put back to back, released back to back. But I'm seeing no example of that at all this weekend, which maybe makes me think that the one person who does bundle it took the weekend off and somebody replaced them. This game is called Sassy Cyber Girl, and it's, I would say, very realistic yet still 2D, natural color tone ladies, cyberpunk style ladies, I think is the implication, whatever cyberpunk really means. In a lot of ways, the cyberpunk aspects are just the background scenes. there's not a lot of circuitry or wiring coming out of the ladies themselves. There's one where the lady looks like she's been shot a couple times, so that's somewhat cyberpunkish. I could definitely see some punk in the images of the ladies, but the cyber part is perhaps a little lackluster. I'm a little surprised there isn't more adult games based on the cyberpunk visuals of Cyberpunk 2077, but then again, Cyberpunk 2077 really did not succeed particularly well. They say it's a puzzle game, but they're not showing me any of the puzzles. So they're just showing me screenshots. Sassy Cyber Girl is $2.54. It says it has full audio for all 103 supported languages again. Seems like Sassy Games is the developer and publisher, so there may be a whole series of Sassy games. I don't really see anything particularly sassy in these characters. It looks like there's 48 images in total, although I really wouldn't be surprised if there's only about 6 or 7 different lady and just several different pictures of the same ladies. So yeah, if you're into punk and a little bit of cyber and puzzle games, I guess that makes sense. Cozy Space, a relaxing home decoration soft game. Yeah, I guess I'll make a short on this, but I think I probably have come to the decision that I probably wouldn't ever really play a home decorating game. So I'm not going to bother to put it on the follow list. Plus, half of these home decorating games / apps I think are all the same, would be my suspicion. Here we have a game called As Planned, where you have to program, but it's all green. And it's a visual programming where you're using labels there. So I'm going to say no to that. Then we have 50-50. Each time you press the button either doubles or loses all your points. So clearly on this there is actually a mathematical way to win at this, because you would just always double down. And that's true for roulette too. If you have an infinite amount of money and you can bet an infinite amount, which you actually can't at most roulette tables, they have a maximum, you would just always bet on black or bet on red, which gives you nearly a 50-50 chance. And your odds change slightly between whether it's 1 green 0 or 2 green zeros, a 0 and a double 0. You want only 1 green 0. But if you had infinite money, if you could bet the infinite amount, just doubling down on red, doubling down on black would eventually pay off. But you also have to, after winning the first time, take your money and run. In this case, it probably is similar case. Regardless, that wouldn't really be a fun game, and visually you can see it's not anything, so no to that. Next we have a game called Snowscapes, which doesn't look interesting. Next we have Orbo's Odyssey, which probably isn't polished enough, but I'll give it a chance. Next we have a game called We're Closed Sorry, which apparently is a Metroidvania game where you play as a rat in a supermarket, which I'm not sure people really would want to play as a rat in a supermarket. Doesn't feel like there's enough variety for a Metroidvania game. You got some dark screenshot syndrome happening on edges too. It's a weird enough game though, so I'm gonna give it a follow for that reason. I'm just being really generous. Interesting cowboy game called Kill the Crows. Fast-paced top-down arena shooter. Give that a chance. Although that's probably not the kind of game I'd really want to play. Tilted looks like it is just a bunch of nonsense visuals. Playing as a mushroom man, just platforming all over the place. That one seems to be a little too weird, even for me. Next we have Gnostic Survivors. Which, yeah, I don't think there's really much here either, so I'm gonna say no to that. Next we have a game called Aonar, which is based off Scottish folklore apparently. I'll give that a follow. Here we have a game called Ping Pong Deluxe, which basically nothing you could do to Pong to make it better or deluxe. A little variety and difference here, but that's about it. I'm gonna say no to that. This reminds me to all the hype around the G4 coming back and how terribly that all went. It's just in the end. You know, the one thing about G4 though I would say is that it did surprisingly fail so fast that you really didn't even have the likes of Kevin Pereira or Adam Sessler abandon the shows as much as they could have been blamed for abandoning Attack of the Show and X-Play coming back, and then you could have potentially made the argument that they didn't really try. Moving on, Football Stars Legend 24. Doesn't look like anything. I even want to put it on the fall list. I just think there's better soccer games out there than this. Yeah. Inherently, now looking back at the reboot of G4, I think it's probably best to describe it as a failure because it tried to be a TV show in a when it really should have just been reimagined in a lot of ways as a YouTube channel with more of a YouTube channel budget and more of a YouTube channel mentality, and probably fresh faces being in charge of making YouTube content, being willing to make some new types of content while also just showing reruns of old content and still trying to explain the tech of the show, which, yeah, they didn't really do anything with the old content, and people have uploads of old X-Play on YouTube. So, like, people are succeeding who probably don't have the copyright to X-Play more than the G4 reboot did. Yeah. If there was just a G4 channel that was old G4 episodes, I think that would do particularly well for nostalgic people. There's nothing here as far as Dreaming in the Mountains. I don't see a game there that interested me. And here we have yet another adult game that has no mature content description and isn't in the adult section. But, I mean, these 2D closer to anime girls with giant cleavage really are scantily clad and should be in the adult section for sure. There's just way too much cleavage showing in this. As for the actual game, it looks like it's just Tetris to unlock the images. Yeah, there probably is some other style I could say here. It definitely looks like it's an anime inspired style. It is definitely an anime style, but it does have a lot of more natural shading and skin tones to it. I wish I was better at knowing artists' names and describing it that way, but even if I did know artists' names, it really wouldn't matter. And then the next adult game we have is called Sudoku Sympathy, which is, I think, the exact same characters and ladies, anime girls, in slightly different poses, but same thing. This time you're doing Sudoku puzzles, and that's selling for $1.39. And again, it's not in the adult section. It really does just feel like we are going to have to see a crackdown happen here on Steam. Otherwise, Steam is going to have to just give up the adult section concept completely, and I don't think that really works at all. Let's see. Next game I can actually show you, called Extremely Powerful Capybaras Training Grounds. Apparently this is a prologue game for something I don't recognize, which is because it's not out yet. Well, we'll wait till it's out before we do anything. I don't care about prologues or demos. Mortal Street Fighter seems to be just trying to create name confusion between Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. And it just doesn't look like there's enough variety in the characters. The animation doesn't look terrible. User interface could use some work, but yeah. Definitely doesn't really look like a game worth putting on the follow list. Here we have a jigsaw puzzle Woman's Day, which seems just to be a jigsaw puzzle game with some women focused images and a fairly simplistic jigsaw puzzle at that. Alright, that's going to be a no too. I probably should hurry up a little bit. Yeah, actually we're fine. We've got 4 more games to go to. We barely went 3 hours. Even moving slow and having nothing to say still manages to make these streams go 3 hours. Hidden Series 1 is a hidden object game with some different art style on it. I feel like The name is pretty awful there, but the art style maybe makes up for that. I don't even know what you would call this as an art style. Like Western chibi almost. Western cartoony. Yeah. I don't even know if there's a good descriptor for it. Do I need to put a hidden object game like this on the follow list? I'm going to in this case. Then we have yet another adult game, and that came out today on the 21st. So yeah, it seems like there's no bundling happening, and there seems like there's no limiting of what days adult games can come out. This is another one that's in the actual adult section called Unholy Angel 2, and weirdly I feel like I could show this because there's just nothing here. There's 10 girls in it, 40 levels, it says. But yeah, you have a thumbnail showing a girl, but you flip through all these screenshots and you get this one image, and that's it. The rest of it's all around this puzzle aspect to it. Yeah. Which I've never really seen in an adult game focus so much on the actual gameplay. $2.69. The numbers don't seem like they add up there. 40 puzzles, 30 girls. That's not a lot of game for $2. Let's see. Next we have a survival horror game called Hangman's Rope, which is already on the follow list, so I'm just gonna have to assume I already made a YouTube short on it, and I don't really have any reason to make any further of a decision, and should just leave it on the follow list. And then final game we have to look at that's come out over the weekend is called Awakened, which looks like nothing. And yeah, that's the end of the show. So yeah, I'll take a nap now after this stream, and then potentially sometime in this evening I'll start streaming to Twitch as a rerun and see how that works as far as making pre-recorded footage. That's going to be it for this recording. Now, as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.